This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, January 18th, 2025. Today's teisho will be on a koan, essentially, from the Hekigan-roku, or Blue Cliff Record. Let me begin by talking a little about our recent trip. We just returned, Rose and I, from visiting our son and daughter-in-law and grandson out in Northern California. Meeting our grandson in person was revelatory. He's just 4 months old now. He was so present and familiar, as if we knew him, like he'd always been here. He was just so completely with it, 100% all the time. There was no space or time for him not to have been here. Waking, sleeping, smiling, laughing, crying, nursing, looking, no self-consciousness, no separation, intimacy, intimacy, intimacy. You can't help but laughing aloud with joy in the presence of a child. The air itself seems to clear up. An absolute presence is simply felt and is all. But William Blake, back in industrial age, beginning of the smoke and wheels and machines of England, probably the last truly civilized man before the Industrial Revolution or during it, suggests that we don't and can't stay like that. We must fall into time and space and self-centeredness, because only by doing so can we, with purpose and effort, actually mature and find out our way back to a truly conscious and fully intimate life. The baby doesn't need enlightenment. Only us lost adults need it. It is we who need to regain an understanding of how precious our original mind of oneness is. And by recognizing our lack of connection with it, be motivated to attain to a mature oneness that does not ignore unique differences, but celebrates them. Indeed, our purpose, we might say, as human beings is to actualize our innate potential, awaken to original mind, and with hard-won adult skills and talents intact, live with greater wisdom and compassion on a new foundation of greater unity rather than our old one of isolation. Without such grounding, and there are many forms it can take, Zen simply being one of the more particularly practical versions, one can seem grown up, but not be very adult, as we now see in our own culture and our own time. The inevitable loss of a newborn's awareness of wholeness and non-differentiation, however, is not an obstacle. As Master Wu Men says in The Gateless Barrier, the failure is wonderful indeed. Why is that? Why is the inevitable loss of the child's felt sense of connection, a loss that is the very source of self-centered greed, anger, delusion, and so of misogyny, racism, destructive climate change, war, and oligarchy, wonderful indeed? Because it opens a path to real wholeness and to mature and conscious living. A child knows, but it doesn't know that it knows. It has no sense of that at all. And so wisdom and compassion can't arise or function. While babies can at times be angels, they're not yet bodhisattvas. How could they be, knowing nothing of impermanence or suffering or even of others? And yet they do notice us. When their eyes start tracking us, or when they look right at us and break into fully radiant smiles or even laughs, what affinities might they be experiencing? What's going on? It really is a mystery, and it touches something mysteriously profound. They seem to see us from a kind of divine perspective, a selfless perspective, and see the divine, the selfless reality of us, just as we are. It is humbling to be around a baby, and it can also be exhausting. They have needs, and they make them known 100%. And while they know nothing of suffering, this doesn't mean they aren't at times anxious or scared or angry, or that they don't feel pain. But there is a difference, and we'll get to that, and how it relates to our own Zen practice realization. Now here's a tiny poem of Blake summing up his view of our necessity, of this fall into time and space and self-centeredness. The poem is called Infant Joy. It's from Songs of Innocence and Experience, and it's very brief. It goes like this. I have no name. I am but 2 days old. What shall I call thee? I happy am. Joy is my name. Sweet joy befall thee. Pretty joy, but 2 days old. Sweet joy, I call thee. Thou dost smile, I sing the while. Sweet joy befall thee. There's a pun at the end, of course. May joy fall on you, but sweet joy will fall. The poem is deceptively simple, but it's all there. Sweet joy befall thee. Blake is telling it like it is. This has to happen. I think of case 42, the gateless barrier, Manjushri and the young woman in Samadhi. Woman's verse for the case goes like this. One can awaken her, the other cannot. Both of them are free, a God mask, a devil mask. The failure is wonderful indeed. Case 20 of the Shoyo-roku, the Book of Serenity, declares that not knowing is most intimate. Also comes to mind. The case is Jizo asked Fayen, or Hogen, would be as Japanese, I guess. What are you up to these days? Hogen said, I am wandering at random. Jizo said, what do you expect from such wandering? Some translations say, from such a pilgrimage. Hogen said, I don't know. Jizo said, not knowing is most intimate. Fayen, or Hogen, was suddenly enlightened. Not knowing is most intimate. Do you get a glimmer of the baby's mind in this? A side point, as mentioned, a baby always shows up, whatever is going on with it, 100%. Tired, cranky, observant, hungry, laughing, a full diaper, whatever. It is 100% in all it does. It doesn't worry about how it appears. It's not showing up for a job interview. It's just 100% crying, looking, smiling, being hungry, eating, spitting up, pooping, trying out arms and legs and spine and neck, turning the head, moving the eyes, taking in sounds, rhythms, making sounds, creating language, chewing on the blankie, sucking on the nipple or binky, understanding intimately, finding out what human senses and a human body are about and can do. Being with someone who is always 100% can be exhausting. And new parents have to jump right into it and mostly never get a full night's sleep, not even close. Yet lacking sleep on the edge of exhaustion, they still show up for the baby and for work and do their best, regardless, 100%. We learn this from the start of our life as children and as parents that we are capable right from the start. What choice do we have? But in time, as Blake predicted, we get caught up in ourselves, which I believe happens around the age of 3 or 4 or even earlier, as we start identifying with thoughts and memories, and with them creatively establish a me, myself, and I, from there on, continue to proudly invest in this hardening sense of an isolated identity. As Zen students, we grapple with this and with the kind of habitual self-protective thinking that grows from it, which is in itself okay, is totally natural, and at times makes very good sense. But as our practice matures, and we begin to see into and through it, this veneer of self-centeredness may fight back. So we find ourselves at times thinking, I'll come to Doksan when I've had 8 hours of sleep the night before and life is going pretty well, and so I'll be at my best, able to show my stuff. Hey, good luck. We didn't start life like this. And one day, I hate to say it, we will all be on our deathbed. We know this is true, and I don't think that hearing this will shock anyone. In fact, my 90-year-old, long ago, when my grandmother Minnie was 90, she told Rose and I a little joke. She said, a man goes to a doctor and says, I don't want to grow old and die. The doctor says, you don't want to grow old and die? And the man says, no, I definitely do not want to grow old and die. My grandmother said, then the doctor said, so? Die young! And then she slapped her thigh. She was 90 years old. She said, get it? You don't want to get old and die? Die young. Yeah. We all know this is coming. We all know this is true. And at that time, we'll have no time off. We'll have to give our all and do our best, just as we are in that final Doksan, when we're lying down, facing ourselves. The baby's practice is going to help us the most then. But what is the baby's practice? Well, we'll get to that. However, I'm not saying that if you're totally exhausted and have a heavy work schedule, or are really not feeling well, you should ignore it and just go on regardless. As in all situations, we each need to find a skillful balance, a middle way. In fact, the middle way. But it's not about being a better you, or only coming when you're the right you. You are it, just as you are. Even a baby knows it. In fact, maybe only a baby knows it. But look, I too learned this by making mistakes. First I went too much one way, then too much the other way. But the baby, well, maybe the clearest take on this, koan-wise, is Blue Cliff Record 80, Chao Chu's A Newborn Baby. The case goes like this. A monk asked Chao Chou, that's Joshu in Japanese, does a newborn baby possess the sixth sense or not? Now, the sixth sense isn't the six senses. The sixth sense is basically the reflecting on what arises in the mind. In other words, it's self-conscious thought. Does a newborn baby possess the sixth sense or not? Chao Chou said, it is like a ball bouncing on swift flowing water. It is like a ball bouncing on swift flowing water. The monk later asked T'ou Tzu, what is the meaning of a ball bouncing on swift flowing water? T'ou Tzu said, moment by moment, it flows on without stopping. Moment by moment, it flows on without stopping. In his teisho on this case, in the Blue Cliff Record, Master Yuan-wu, that would be Engo in Japanese, says that of the 16 forms of meditation practice, the baby's practice is best. The baby's practice is best. This doesn't mean there's nothing, that all is blank. Voidness is not biblical in the sense of all was void on the waters of creation, but moment by moment, it flows on without stopping. As T'ou Tzu says, no sticking. This is it, right now is it. Form is emptiness, emptiness form, right now. The fundamental realization of non-dual prajna wisdom is right now. We don't have to go out and get to it as if emptiness were somewhere else in time or space. It is time and it is space. An analogy might be living on planet Earth. We are just as far out in space as any planet in the universe. We don't have to go anywhere to be out in space. Emptiness, too, is not something we have to get to. The fresh eyes of baby practice restores us and all things. Jesus said you must become as a child again to enter the kingdom of heaven. Yuan-wu says this too, right in the Blue Cliff Record, and I quote, "A person who studies the path, that is, who practices the way, must become again like an infant." Why? Do you see the point? Right now. Do you see the point? Or how about this from the 17th century English mystic Thomas Traherne in his Centuries of Meditation? This is from the 3rd century. "The corn was orient and immortal wheat, which never should be reaped nor was ever sown. I thought it had stood," he's talking about being a child, "I thought it had stood from everlasting to everlasting. The dust and stones of the street were as precious as gold. The gates were at first the end of the world. The green trees, when I saw them first through one of the gates, transported and ravished me. Their sweetness and unusual beauty made my heart to leap, and almost mad with ecstasy. They were such strange and wonderful things. The man, oh, what venerable and reverend creatures did the aged seem, immortal cherubim, and young men glittering and sparkling angels, and maids strange seraphic pieces of life and beauty. Boys and girls tumbling in the street and playing were moving jewels. I knew not that they were born or should die, but all things abided eternally, as they were in their proper places. Eternity was manifest in the light of the day, and something infinite behind everything appeared, which talked with my expectation and moved my desire. The city seemed to stand in Eden or to be built in heaven. The streets were mine. The temple was mine. The people were mine. Their clothes and gold and silver were mine, as much as their sparkling eyes, fair skins, and ruddy faces. The skies were mine, and so were the sun and moon and stars, and all the world was mine, and I, the only spectator and enjoyer of it. I knew no churlish properties, nor bounds, nor divisions, but all properties and divisions were mine, all treasures and the possessors of them. So that with much ado I was corrupted and made to learn the dirty devices of this world, which now I unlearn and become, as it were, a little child again, that I may enter into the kingdom of heaven." So, a monk asked Chao Chou, does a newborn baby possess the sixth sense or not? Chao Chou said, "It is like a ball bouncing on swift flowing water." The monk later asked T'ou Tzu, what is the meaning of a ball bouncing on swift-flowing water? Tosu said, moment by moment, it flows on without stopping. Now, I'm going to read to you from two teishos on this, one by Yamada Roshi, Eiken Roshi's teacher. And he says, let me make a brief summary of this complex question of consciousness. The six senses are sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and idea, or thought. The eyes see color and form. The ear hears sound, ears. The nose smells odors, and the tongue tastes. The body or the skin has feeling. The sixth sense of idea also means consciousness and is the process whereby we take the information given by the other senses and are conscious that this is a color or that is a sound, etc. It also includes the movements of the mind in like or dislike. The first five senses come from the body, but idea comes from the heart-mind. These are the six consciousnesses, which include the first five having to do with the body, the last having to do with the mind. The sixth consciousness of discernment is our everyday mind. In Buddhist psychology, the next or seventh consciousness is known as the mana consciousness. This is the unending consciousness of a self, in other words, a constant self of something we term I. It is also known as the consciousness which constantly judges and considers. The consciousness of a separate ego emerges from this. The next class of consciousness is the alaya, or storehouse consciousness. This is the consciousness which stores up all accumulated experience. The first five classes of consciousness are discerned by the sixth consciousness, and the seventh consciousness, the constant awareness of an individual self, transfers these experiences to the eighth consciousness for storage, much like a mail transfer system. The forms of consciousness which disappear when we die are the ones numbering up to the sixth. The seventh and eighth forms of consciousness remain and never die. Thus, although a child knows nothing at birth, it still has, according to Buddhist psychology, all the experiences from past lives stored away in the eighth consciousness. For example, the question of why genius occurs in certain individuals is one which has challenged modern-day psychologists, but which resists solution. From the standpoint of Buddhist psychology, however, there's no problem at all. For when all the experiences and struggles stored in the eighth consciousness are produced, it is perfectly possible that a genius will result from this. But what about satori? That is clear realization of self-nature, not just kensho, a quick glimpse. This is the act of cutting through the eighth consciousness and reaching the ninth consciousness. This is known as amala consciousness, spotless consciousness, and is totally empty. The seventh, eighth, and ninth forms of consciousness are alike in being invisible, and all of us are from the standpoint, and all of us are one from the standpoint of those forms of consciousness. On the surface, we may appear as separate existences, but when we arrive at these consciousnesses, we are alike in our common root of total emptiness. Take the example of a bamboo plant. Many shoots emerge from the single plant, but further down, they are all part of the same single root. It's actually more complex than that, but I've attempted here to give a rough overview of this question of consciousness. In today's koan, a monk uses the example of consciousness, of the consciousness that is of a newborn baby, to question Joshu on this. So he asks, as you know, Joshu, if a newborn baby has the sixth consciousness, and then it goes on to what is the swift stream? When Joshu says it's like a ball bouncing on a swift stream. This is our own consciousness, says Yamada Roshi. We cannot see our own consciousness, but it is there just the same, and it is continuously active. It has unlimited capabilities while being totally empty. That is, empty of all self-centeredness. When I speak and when you listen, this is no other than the great activity of nothingness or emptiness. There is nothing at all to see or perceive. Although it cannot be grasped by our five senses, our consciousness engaged continuously in great activity. I also feel it is right to go on and call this life itself. A newborn baby's consciousness is just like a ball bouncing on the swift current. Listen to a newborn infant crying, wah, wah, wah. That is the ball. Each wah is complete in itself. It's not a single ball flowing down the stream. There's this ball and then the next ball. Excuse me. And the next and the next, each one separate and independent. And although they are separate and independent, they are at the same time one. It is one consciousness and one stream. We too are the same way. When we are hungry, we are conscious of it. This is a consciousness which emerges out of nowhere. If a ball is bounced upon it, it emerges. There are also consciousnesses which emerge even if a ball is not bounced. For example, when you remember the past and think back on an unpleasant time, this is also bouncing the ball on the stream of consciousness. That's an excerpt from a longer teisho by Yamada Roshi, which is a series of unpublished teishos he gave on the Blue Cliff record. Now here is Yuan-wu, or Engo in Japanese. This is in the Blue Cliff record itself. This is from over 1,000 years ago, or around 1,000 years ago. So Shuedo took the original 100 cases, wrote a verse and a guide for each, and then about 60 years later, Yuan-wu wrote commentaries on the cases and also on Shuedo's poetry and guides, essentially. So Yuan-wu's commentary. Although a newborn baby is equipped with the six consciousnesses, though his eyes can see and his ears can hear, he doesn't yet discriminate among the six sense objects. At this time, he knows nothing of good and evil, long and short, right and wrong, gain and loss. A person who studies the path must become again like an infant. Then praise and blame, success and fame, unfavorable circumstances and favorable environments, none of these can move him. Though his eyes see form, he's the same as a blind man. Though his ears hear sound, he's the same as a deaf man. Of course, he doesn't mean this literally. Be very careful. He is like a fool, like an idiot. His mind is motionless as Mount Sumero. This is the place where patch-robed monks really and truly acquire power. An ancient said, "My patched garment covering my head, myriad concerns cease. At this time, I don't understand anything at all." At this time, I don't understand anything at all. Now, of course, he's not like a fool, like an idiot, and in this line about I don't understand anything at all, he is not saying he's like Homer Simpson, and his response is, duh. That's not what he means. Not knowing is most intimate. Think of Master Ikkyu's wonderful quote from around in the 15th century. When I tried to remember, I always forgot. But once I forgot, I never forget. Once I forget my self-centeredness completely, like a baby, everything I've been seeking is already right there. Once I forgot, I never forget. Only if you can be like this will you have a small share of attainment. Though an adept is like this, nevertheless, he can't be fooled at all as before. Mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. He is without artifice and without clinging thoughts. He is like the sun and moon moving through the sky without ever stopping and without saying, I have so many names and forms. He is like the sky everywhere covering, like the earth everywhere supporting. Since they have no mind, they bring up and nurture myriad beings without saying, I have so many accomplishments. Since sky and earth are mindless, they last forever. What has mind has limits. What is born, come into consciousness, must fade away, must die. A person who has attained the path is like this, too. In the midst of no activity, he carries out his activities, accepting all unfavorable and favorable circumstances with a compassionate heart. When they got to this point, the ancients still upbraided themselves and said, when you've completely, perfectly comprehended, there's nothing to comprehend. In the dark, abstruse, hidden place, you still must be rebuked. Aiken Roshi used to put it like this: not enough yet. Not yet enough. They also said all things are thoroughly comprehended and all beings are clearly understood. When the one who has arrived senses this, he's startled in the darkness. Again it was said, without making a sound, he goes beyond the ordinary and enters sagehood. The reclining dragon deeply fears the blue pool's clarity. In other words, the top of the pole is still a stuck place. You must take a step from the top of the pole, from emptiness itself, and the world of the 10 directions will be your entire body. Now, if human beings can be like this always, how can a single name remain in the world? Though it's this way, they must go on to leap out of their nest before they attain. Haven't you seen where it says in the Huayan Sutra, a bodhisattva of the 8th stage, that's immovability, turns the great Dharma wheel in an atom of dust, using the wisdom of non-activity. Though there are 10 stages said to be of the bodhisattva's career. These are joy, freedom from defilement, emanating light, radiant wisdom, impossible to surpass, which is true, true thusness, becoming manifest, far-reaching. The 8th then is immovability, 9th is good wisdom, and 10 is clouds of Dharma. These are states of, or stages like the ox-herding pictures. 10 stages, 10 ox-herding pictures. At all times, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, he doesn't cling to gain and loss, but lets himself move and flow into the sea of all knowledge. When patched-robed monks get here, they still must not become attached. They follow the occasion freely. When they have tea, they drink tea. When they have food, they eat food. When they come to movie night, they watch a movie. Neither the words concentration nor not concentration can be applied to this transcendental matter. That's an important point. Neither the words concentration nor not concentration, neither knowing or not knowing, can be applied to this transcendental matter. Now we're entering the baby's realm of practice, neither knowing or not knowing, neither concentration nor not concentration. Master Shantao of the Stone Grotto taught this congregation saying, haven't you seen a little one when it's just emerged from the womb? Has a baby ever said, I know how to read the sutras? At that time, it does not know the meaning of having the Buddha nature or not having the Buddha nature. As he grows up, he learns all sorts of knowledge, then, of course, comes forth saying, I am able and I understand, without knowing that this is troubling over illusory dusts. Among the 16 contemplation practices, the baby's practice is the best. Among the 16 contemplation practices, the baby's practice is the best. When he's babbling, he symbolizes the person studying the path with his detachment from the discriminating mind that grasps and rejects. That's why I'm praising infants. I can make a comparison by taking the case of a baby. But if I say that the baby is the path, people of these times would misunderstand. Not only people of those times, 1,000 years ago, people today would misunderstand as well. Going around imitating a baby really won't do. Saying goo-goo and drooling isn't going to cut it. Nanchuan said, after 18, I was able to make a living. That is, by the time of 18, he had realized his own nature and had both his feet on the ground. He was home. Chao Chou said, after 18, I was able to break up the family and scatter the household. This is the same point. At 18, he had his first realization. He was independent then. In short, meaning he was an adult. But he was not yet fully mature. He kept at it, and it wasn't until 56 that he had complete realization. Chao Chou then continued on, testing his understanding against all comers and all teachers of the time that he could reach. And it wasn't until, get this, 80 that he first began teaching, and he taught till his death at 120. This strikes me personally as, I think in 2 or 3 days, I turned 79. So, Chao Chou, quite amazing. He also said, I was in the South for 20 years. Get this. Only the 2 meal times of gruel and rice were points of mixed application of mind. That he was practicing in the South, that's where the 6th patriarch was, and that's where Zen was flourishing, for 20 years. And the only times his mind wandered at all were during the meal times when food was being served. That's a wow. Again, the Shurangama Sutra says the fullness of the 6th consciousness enters to merge in the fullness of the storehouse consciousness, going into the realm of consciousness, that is, heading up towards the 8th consciousness, as Yamada Roshi spoke about in the teisho I read to you earlier. The Cleary brothers, their edition of the Blue Cliff record is pretty much still the standard one, the only really complete translation. It's a wonderful book and well worth just reading, if you, especially if you're working on koans from the Blue Cliff record. In any case, they notes that the 8th consciousnesses are, with enlightenment, transformed into 4 knowledges, as follows. The first 5 consciousnesses associated with seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching are transmuted into the knowledge of accomplishment. The 6th consciousness becomes the wondrous observing knowledge. The 7th becomes the knowledge of equality. And the 8th becomes the great mirror knowledge. Great mirror knowledge. Your mind is like a mirror. No self-consciousness, they're interrupting the complete entrance, like in a mirror. Everything seen clearly, without any isolating, separating identification, marring, like dust, that mirror. When Chao Chou said tossing a ball on swift-flowing water, he was already turning smoothly. When you toss it onto swift-flowing water in a blink of an eye, it's gone. As the Shurangama Sutra says, looked upon from afar, swift-flowing water is tranquil and still. An ancient said, in a fast-flowing river, the currents of water never stop, and they are unaware of each other. All things are like this too. The monk also asked T'ou Tzu, what's the meaning of tossing a ball on swift-flowing water? T'ou Tzu said, moment to moment, non-stop flow, spontaneously matching the monk's question perfectly. The practice of these ancients, Chao Chou and T'ou Tzu, were so thoroughgoing that they answered as one. They no longer make use of calculations. As soon as you question them, they already know where you come down. When the ancients studied the path, they were the same as a newborn baby, though possessed of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. They didn't discriminate among the 6 sense objects. In some, they were non-active. Now let's be clear, that really means selfless, non-interfering, which doesn't mean not making decisions or not being able to choose apple pie over mac and cheese for dessert. Selfless, non-interfering. Everything enters and moves along at its own pace, like a mirror, like things seen in a mirror. When you get to this realm, then you can overcome dragons and subdue tigers, die sitting or die standing up. Right now, people should just take the myriad phenomena before their eyes and put them to rest at once. Although there's no activity, as of old, mountains are mountains, and rivers are rivers. Let me say here, we might say they step in and they announce themselves. There's no host, there's no guest, there's no mental effort involved. There's just fully mountain, just fully river. Here's a poem of Li Po's, one of the great poets of the Tong era. Zazen on Jingting Mountain. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Also, here's this from the 9th ox-herding picture, and this is the version in the 3 Pillars of Zen. This is the commentary on it, and then the verse. From the beginning, there's not been so much as a speck of dust to mar their intrinsic purity. In other words, you don't have to wipe the mirror clean. It's empty from the start. It's clear from the start, dust and all. He observes the waxing and waning of life in the world while abiding unassertively in a state of unshakable serenity. This waxing and waning is no phantom or illusion, but a manifestation of the source. Why then is there need to strive for anything? The waters are blue. The mountains are green. Alone with himself, he observes things endlessly changing. The waters are blue. The mountains are green. Alone with himself or herself, they observe things endlessly changing. And here's the verse. He has returned to the origin, come back to the source, but his steps have been taken in vain. It is as though he were now blind and deaf, seated in his hut he hankers not for things outside. Streams meander on of themselves. Red flowers naturally bloom red. Streams meander on of themselves. Red flowers naturally bloom red. To live this way is to find that each moment is fully itself, fully fresh and new. Who wouldn't want to live like that? I know I would. So practice realization continues on endlessly, moment by moment. Our failure, that is the ultimate failure of all our self-centered stratagems and clingings, all our carefully built up sense of entitlement and isolation, is truly wonderful indeed. Wow, wow, is not babyish at all. It is a full expression. Later, let us savor T'ou Tzu's confirming the response. to the monk's question about Chao Chu's answer, or confirming response to the monk's question about Chao Chu's answer as to whether the newborn baby has the sixth consciousness or not. What is the meaning of a ball bouncing on swift-flowing water? T'ou Tzu said, moment by moment, it flows on without stopping. Let the river flow. Letting go is not, as some people seem to fearfully imagine, a matter of something called me dropping into a vast mayonnaise-like void of undifferentiated oneness. Not at all. Once a monk asked the teacher, "How do I enter the way?" The teacher responded, "Do you hear the stream flowing outside the window?" "Yes," said the monk. "Enter there," said the teacher. "Enter there." But let me ask you, how do you do that? And how would you demonstrate it? Emptiness isn't empty, except of what we've habitually and unconsciously and unnecessarily added to it in the process of leaving our original newborn joy and turning into responsible and self-conscious adults. Emptiness is not one that is already one too many. It is nothing at all, and that is actually and very distinctly splash, 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 wah, wah. It is this. We'll end the teisho here and recite our great vows together for all.